Hello, Super Bowl refugees on the Tubely webs. I'm Mr. Spork, and these are Mr. Spork's hands. There are very few things in the world, with the possible exception of politics, that I care about less than football on either side of the Atlantic. And on days like today, I just really go do something completely unrelated to the spectacle that is on American TV at the moment. However, the one good thing about Super Bowl Sunday, every single year, almost every grocery store in North America puts their tortilla chips on sale, which I absolutely love because I'm a nacho fan. Love them. Tortilla chips are still one of those things that have eluded me making at home. I'm working on it though. Stay tuned. But when I can get cheap tortilla chips, it is nacho weekend. But one of the tricks, or I should say habits, that I have formed when I am making anything with ground meat — I don't eat that much meat anymore, but when I do, I always grind my meat fresh from a whole piece of meat. I'm getting one animal. I don't know how many are in those packages at the grocery store, but it's probably more than one. I'm in control of what cuts of meat I'm using. I'm in control of where I got the meat. I usually get it from a local farmer up the road, and quite frankly, when you buy a big piece of meat and process it down yourself, butcher it or grind it or what have you, you're probably going to end up paying about the same amount of money, because you're really paying through the nose for the labor involved in processing that meat at the grocery store. So you're going to get a better quality of meat for probably about the same amount of money. You're going to pay a little bit more to the farmer for the good quality stuff, but then you're going to save that much money when you go and you process yourself. Now, the idea with ground meat has become kind of the de facto standard in a lot of places in North America, simply because, for that matter in the UK too, mince is very popular because it's cheap. The people that make ground meat are using the parts and pieces of the animal that wouldn't otherwise be sold as premium cuts. And that's just, the way it works. And I think that's a good thing, because we should use every last bit of the thing, nose to tail, as they say. But grinding at home can be a little bit tricky. Certainly it will work if you partially freeze it, cube it up, partially freeze it, and go through a food processor. I've got a great food processor, as you guys have seen, and it will work. But when you do that, you're really tightening and toughening the meat. You're processing it and working it too much. So it's not the ideal device. That's when I went shopping for a meat grinder. That's what I'm going to show you today, is my big Horkin meat grinder. Now, funny enough, you're saying, hey, this guy that says he doesn't eat that much meat, why has he got this big monster meat grinder? I'll tell you why. I've got a couple dozen apple trees out on the farm. This is the perfect device for grinding my apples every fall when I want to go to make cider. So that's really why I bought it originally, but as a nice little offshoot, I get to grind my own meat. Parts that you look for. I'm not going to endorse any particular brand because there's several good ones out there. I'm certainly pleased with this one. It wasn't cheap, but it does a good job. But I want to show you the parts that you're looking for. First is the grinding feed auger, I guess you'd call this. And you want nice big gaps, because it's going to take in those chunks of meat. So however big this gap is, that's how big you can cut your pieces of meat. If it's got a smaller gap on it, you need to cut your meat smaller, more work, more hassle, less likely to do it. So basically look for a big wide gap on that. The grinding plates themselves, they should be several available. They're not adjustable per se, but there are several that come with the device. This is the one I use for ground meat. You can get a bigger grind from something like this, and something like this is made for a sausage stuffing attachment. You put a kind of a cone nozzle funnel on the end of the thing, and it will force it out without grinding it any farther. So look for multiple plates, multiple size plates for your grinding. Notice that all the parts here that come in contact with the meat, with the possible exception of this one little plastic bushing, these are all stainless steel. So I can go in, I can bleach them, I can sterilize them, I can heat process them, I can do whatever I need to really clean them up. And the thing to look for when you disassemble a grinder, when you're about to buy it, look for all the little nooks and crannies that could become trouble spots. On this particular one, the two that I've found, right here on the edge, because meat's being forced out through here, meat gets collected in this corner right here. Not a terrible problem, because again, I can take the whole thing off and sterilize it. Also, inspect the grinder, because the auger, I should say, because that's really where the meat is going to do the bulk of the work. And on this one, the only trouble spot I've found is right here. This little tiny line seems to collect a lot of stuff, so I've got to be extra careful when I'm cleaning that. Of course, you have to make sure that you're very careful when you're working with raw meat, sterilize and so on and so forth, to get rid of any potential pathogens on the next run of your processor. In fact, what I do when I'm about to grind, I go ahead and re-sterilize everything right before I go into it. So I'm going to put this thing together just to show you how it goes together. There's a big, huge, over here off camera, there's a big, huge motor. The thing, quite honestly, it weighs a ton. And you might be saying to yourself, well, geez, I don't know if I want one that big. And you can probably get away with a smaller one, but because of my apple requirement, I literally do, you know, bushel and bushel and bushel of apples. So I needed a big one anyway. But the bigger the better. I've never said to myself, geez, I wish I had a smaller one. So get as much as you get, as big as you can afford there. On this particular one, the way it assembles, I put the bushing on like this, and this goes into the tube. Curiously enough, you'd think that it almost seems natural that it would go on this way, but it doesn't. It goes on this way because this cutting edge goes up against this plate. The big difference in a meat grinder versus a food processor is that you're grinding at relatively slow speeds, so you don't get that tightening and tensing like you do with a food processor. The slow speed gives you that, I almost want to call it a fluffy texture of finished meat, and that's really what you want. I've also noticed that that fluffy texture, as long as you don't overhandle it when you're packing it, it can preserve through freezing. So if you freeze it fluffy, it comes out fluffy, as long as you, at nowhere in the process, mush it down. And that's a good thing. That makes for more flexible meat in your recipes. So that goes on there. Then the plate's got a little line-up notch. It goes on here like this. All of your food processors, or all of your meat grinders are going to be roughly the same technology. Relatively low speed, a plate with a grinding or a cutting wheel up against it. That's what does the work. I've seen them big, I've seen them small, I've seen them as cheap as 50 bucks for a manual version, and I've seen them as expensive as $2,000 for a pro version, and even bigger than that, obviously. But somewhere in that scale, you're going to find one that fits your needs. I suggest that you disassemble it completely and look for those nooks and crevices. Make sure that there's everything made out of stainless that comes in contact with the meat for cleanability. Make sure it's got a nice big opening and feed tube on it, which is what this one is. They rate this one as a 22 liter. I'm not sure what 22 liter translates to, 22 liters per minute or per hour or something, but this one will get through it. So this is all set up. Let me go grab the cut of pork that I'm going to do today. I've got a half pork loin from the guys up the road. So here I am with my whole pork loin. It's from the guys up the road. It cost me about $2.50 Canadian a pound. And again, got it straight from the farmer. Just real quick anatomy, you've got the loin end and the rib end, sometimes called the blade end. Basically, it's the whole length of the animal, and you're, of course, taking it along the different parts. This is towards the front, this is towards the back of the animal. For this one, this is about a 6.5 pound, about a 3 kilo piece of meat. I'm going to take about half right here. This part would be the center loin. This is where you're going to get your center cut pork chops, things like that. I'm going to take this. This is going to be for a different project. Let me just move this out of the way. This also, when you cut your own pork loins, allows you to make nice, thick chops. One of the problems I see with grocery store chops these days is they are getting thinner and thinner and thinner. I guess because I think maybe when they spread it out, it looks like there's more. But when you have your own large piece of meat, you can cut them the way you want. I mean, that would be an awesome pork chop if you were a carnivore. Oh, I don't indulge much, but when I do, I want the good stuff. So this is ready to go into the grinder real quick. I should also say that my grinder usually has a big hopper here on the top made out of stainless that allows you to put all this up above the machine. You don't have to do this separately, but obviously for filming I had to make some exceptions. It's this kind of affair, but obviously this is going to look really bad on camera. But one of the things that you do need to remember is that they almost all come with a pusher. Safety first. Use the pusher when you're grinding. Grabs onto it. You can feel when it takes over and gets going. And notice that I am not playing around here on this end. I'm just letting it fall naturally. That's what keeps it loose, and loose is a good thing when it comes to meat after it's been ground. And there you go. That's all there is to it. Just very gently take this off of this. is my ground pork for, that's probably a month's worth for me. You're ready to go. Now let me give you another real quick trick. Here's where I should be able to show you the video of using a potato as a trick to push any meat that's left in the grinding chamber out. Remember, you got to have something behind it to push it out. So by peeling a potato and using that in there, you're down a 15-cent per pound potato rather than a $2.50 per pound piece of pork. But of course, I accidentally hit the delete button on that segment when I was editing. So hey, my video skills aren't the greatest, but the potato trick really does work. So most of this fresh ground pork is going to get packed down into 500-gram packages, a little bit more than a pound packages, because that's the size I use. I use my vacuum sealer, seal it down tight, nice thick bags, and it's going to stay in the freezer for as long as I need it to. But I am going to do something for a very kind viewer out there. Shout out to Vel Curry, who asked about my sausage making technique. I'm not making pepperoni or sopressata or salami much anymore these days. That's where you use the curing salts, and time and temperature is very, very important. This is just fresh country sausage, if you want to call it that. I don't even bother to put it into casings any longer because more often than not I'm using it loose anyway. But I'm going to take a pound of this beautifully fresh ground meat, again handling it as little as possible. That's half a pound, that's a pound, right? Oh, almost. Where is it? There's a pound right there, 454 grams. And let me go wash my hands real fast. And now, of course, we need to get some seasoning in there. The first thing for sausage is going to be salt. Don't be overly shy with your salt here, but neither do you need to make it so salty you can't taste it. But it is meat, so you need to do some pretty good seasoning with it. Now, for me, to get really good color on that sausage, I use just about the same amount of sugar. I'm just using it almost like I would salt. Basically, you're going to get better color in that, again, a little bit of sweetness. Don't go nuts unless you're trying to go nuts with the sweetening. Of course, you could make some amazing sausages using honey or maple or some other sweetening in there, but that goes in on top. That's kind of the curing part of this, even though we're not really curing it. You want a little of that cured sort of feeling to it. Now you need some spices. For me, sausage always includes fennel, so I'm going to go with I'm going to call that a good half teaspoon of fennel. Don't go nuts on your fennel because you can overpower very easily. Just as equally important for me is some freshly rubbed sage. I can go straight in with that. I'm going to do, that's probably a good teaspoon of freshly rubbed sage in there. I like a little hot, so I'm going to go in with about a half of a teaspoon of chili flakes. I'd use some black pepper as well, but I'm out of black pepper because the ad sales haven't been quite as good lately. So I'm going to do a little bit of white pepper. That's what I've got laying around. The sausage won't care. Again, about a half teaspoon there. That's all I'm going to use today, but there are some option plays, obviously, that you could put into your sausage mix if you wanted some oregano or marjoram. That works really well. If you want a little bit darker sausage, some good quality paprika. Don't use the old sale stuff. Go get you a good fresh batch of paprika. You might even want to try a little bit of smoked paprika in this case, but if you're going to go smoked, go real easy on the measure because, again, it's easy to overpower. This is about the pork, not about the seasoning all the time. And also another one that you can overpower very easily with is clove. Some people like a little bit in there. I am actually literally going to take one single clove today and throw that into my spice blend. Another little trick that I've used for very good sausages, especially when I'm using honey as the sweetener, I take some of my homemade garlic, homegrown garlic, I should say. I use these little mesh bags. You can buy these bags literally for like, I think they're like a nickel a piece online. I've got a box of 100 of them I bought years ago. And these do a really good job, and I don't have to mess with braiding the garlic. So that's a little tip for your homegrown garlic gardener, which, by the way, should be in the ground already because garlic needs the winter for it to overwinter, so you should have put it in the ground last fall. Some places can get away with planting in the spring, but that's a whole other video. Anyway, you could take some of these fresh garlic cloves, probably for a pound of sausage, probably a whole head of garlic, I would say. And what you can do, like I did with the potato earlier in the grinder, you can run the garlic through the grinder at some point in your grinding process if you want to go that route. Either one of those or any of those option plays work really, really well, but that's all you need when you get this spice ground down. And as always, I'm going to tell you to make sure you do this freshly ground. It just makes a huge world of difference. I've got a little bit more than I need there. That's probably 2 teaspoons in there. I'm going to use maybe half of that. And now here's the part where you can really kind of mess up sausage. The whole process of grinding the meat fresh is to keep it loose and light and fluffy. And that's where you can screw up by overworking this. I'm going to just toss it together so it gets all coated as best I can. I know my taste. I'm probably going to go and grab the other half of that teaspoon of spice mix. So again, not overly worked. Don't worry, I'm going to sterilize everything after I'm done making the video. So I've got, okay, I'm going to call it a teaspoon and a half worth of that mix in there. And now this is, if there is an important or a tricky part to this, I've noticed that this now needs to go sit in the fridge for at least overnight. Sitting overnight with the salt and the sugar, it's going to draw out moisture. It's going to suck flavors back in. If you wanted to hurry it along a little bit, you need to get some kind of a liquid component in there. And in that case, if I'm in a real hurry for sausage, I actually take about a teaspoon of soy sauce and thin it out with a couple teaspoons of water and put that in there. The water will help speed things along, although that's going to give you a more moist sausage. And that's not always a good thing. But again, if you're in a hurry, that's a trick for you. So there you go. Fresh sausage making, fresh grinding. Please do it from a single big piece of meat that you got from somebody you know the pig was raised right, or the cow was raised right, or for that matter, the chicken and the turkey was raised right. It's the right thing to do. I do hope you try this at home. I do hope you maybe get together with some friends and get a big grinder and share it between yourselves. All of those things will work, but grind it yourself fresh. It will be a much better product for you. So in however long it's been on the clock there, you have to rewind and check, maybe what, 45 minutes or so. I've got all of that meat packed off, cleared the decks. The parts of the machine are already in the sterilized cycle, ready to go. Not that much time, really, if you think about it, considering that while you may not save a ton of money by going to the farmer, you're going to get a much better quality product, and it really will be different than the pre-ground stuff you get in the grocery store. If you don't believe me, buy a little of the pre-ground stuff and get the butcher at the counter to grind you some fresh right before your very eyes. Take it home immediately and test try it off and taste. You will know the difference. Believe me, it works really well. And again, you can scale it up to however many people you need to feed for however much volume, better quality, probably a lower price with just a little bit of specialized equipment. Full range of prices on the things. I've seen them as, like say, a manual one as cheap as $50 and the expensive one's going up there, but somewhere in there in between, I bet you there's an equal trade-off for quality versus price. What I'm doing over here is just the leftovers that I used with the potato to push out of my the end of the grinder there. I'm using this as a test for my sausage spice. You always want to fry off a little bit of that sausage just to test to make sure you got the flavors right before you pack it off the rest of the way. But I can almost guarantee you it's going to be pretty darn good. It looks like potato hash at this point. I'm going to probably throw a few vegetables in there, and boom, there's my afternoon lunch snack. So that leaves me to say thank you ever so much for liking and thumbs upping and tweety, snap, twitting, and all that other social media stuff. Please tell people I'm out here doing this, sharing it around to your friends that you think might like it. And if you haven't, please do subscribe, because those numbers are very important to us as YouTubers these days. Of course, if you've got the extra 30 seconds to watch the ad that runs after this, I appreciate it, because it throws a few pennies in my pocket. I can probably go get some black peppercorns. Until next time, I am Mr. Spork. These are Mr. Spork's hands. Now go, grind your own, make your own, enjoy the food, enjoy the flavors. Cheers.